lovely town of Sebastopol, and we're sitting on the deck of George and Betty Arlen's home, looking south out on Lake Michigan. George and Betty have been here in Door County for many years, and before we get to some of their early Door County days, I'd like to back up a little and ask a very simple question. This is George, that's obviously Betty. Where did you two first meet?
Well, we actually met in Chicago. At the time, I was with Sears, an executive with Sears, and Betty was doing cancer research, with a doctor in the Chicago area. We met at a party, and our first invitation, it's my first invitation, asking for a date, was asking her if she'd like to go on a horseback ride in Lincoln Park. And it so happens it was a breakfast ride. And Betty said, yes, she'd love to. So I guess it's a little unusual to have a first date on horseback.
Very good, very nice.
But we had a great time, and we had breakfast, and from that point on, our relationship developed to the point where we eventually were married in San Francisco. And because I had promised friends of mine, having been there for many, many years, that when I got married, I said we would definitely be married. And we stayed at the Mark Hopkins Hotel, and we had our wedding celebration.
Very good. Would you care to share with us the number of years ago that took place?
Yes, that took place in 1948. We were married.
Oh, terrific.
And so we've been married now
59 years.
December 19th for 58 years to be exact.
Okay.
And we're still going strong.
Terrific, terrific, terrific. Tell me now, you two things I'd like to pick up on here. So you were in Chicago working for Sears. And what was your capacity at that time?
Well, I think I should go back a little bit.
Okay.
I graduated from Stuyvesant High School, which today is considered one of the outstanding high schools.
As a New York guy, I know that
he's a New York
the reputation of Stuyvesant High School is just outstanding. Has been for years, and it's one of the academically elite high schools in the country. And I also heard a rumor that you were a valedictorian of your graduating class.
That's right. It was a graduating class of 1,000.
Terrific.
And I was the valedictorian.
Terrific. And
I went on to New York University and got my bachelor's and my MBA, my master's degree in business administration.
Also from NYU?
That was from New York University, yes.
Terrific.
Now, as you know, back in the Depression, there weren't many jobs available. The unemployment rate was 27%, but I was fortunate in getting a position with the Emporium in San Francisco, which was the largest department store. It probably was to San Francisco what Hudson's in Detroit is to Detroit. Mm-hmm. And I had some very interesting experiences there. I eventually was a merchandise manager of the home furnishings division, and I traveled extensively on the Pacific Coast. I had one ambition outside of my business, and that was to climb Mount Whitney, which is 14,600 feet, and also visit and get to Death Valley within a period of 3 days. And I'm happy to relate that I accomplished that. I stayed overnight at 10,000 feet, got to the top of Mount Whitney, which automatically made me a member of the Sierra Nevada Climbing Club. And the next day, after a little rest, this friend of mine and I got to Death Valley, which is 300 feet below sea level. So I don't know how many people have accomplished that,
Yeah.
but I did it. And
You didn't have Betty with you on that one.
no, Betty
Not
was
on
not.
that trip. Betty Wisely
I
said.
was at the other side of the country at that point.
Okay.
The,
So from the Emporium, what came
and the
next?
Emporium, I figured that Sears Roebuck at the time is probably what Walmart is today. It was the dominant retailing organization. They were interested in getting into retail to a greater degree, and with my background and my background educationally and with the Emporium was what they were looking for. And I worked sort of in their research department and then in the merchandising division. I was hired by Donald Nelson, who was selected by President Roosevelt to head up the War Production Board. And he did a magnificent job. I mean, in organizing every factory in the United States. I don't think he's quite gotten the recognition that he should have, because I've mentioned his name time and again to some prominent people and they didn't even know who he was.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's life for you. I was very happy that I could participate to the extent that when he called, there was shortage of chronographs for the Air Force.
Shortage of.
Chronograph.
Okay.
A chronograph is a
Yeah.
watch
Right.
that keeps very accurate time by hours, minutes, and seconds.
Right.
And every aviator has to have one. No ifs, ands, and buts about them. It's a question of we had maximum production in this country. Although at Sears, I was in charge of the jewelry division, which included watches and clocks. We had our own watch factory, diamonds and scientific instruments, etc. And I had excellent connections in Switzerland. And Roland Cassell, who was one of the dominant figures in the watch industry at that time, was able to get production set up for me. The thing was, how do I get them to the United States from Switzerland? Switzerland, of course, was neutral, and they were unquestionably making items for the opponents, for the Nazis. But we managed to get them through Cuba, up in Cuba. And I went.
George, I'm going to interrupt. Tell me that gentleman's name again. The watch.
You mean the head of the direct?
No, the gentleman that you wanted to get from Switzerland to the U.S.
Roland Cassell,
Cassell.
spelled G-S-E-L-L.
Yeah.
And while it was difficult, I did get transportation to Havana and met the Minister of Import and Export, who, by the way, figured that as a sideline would seriously be interested in selling liquor, but he said, we're wasting so much liquor, he said, on gasoline. I mean, operate automobiles. But that's beside the point. The point is, Cuba was very cooperative at the time, and we were able to get the watches from Cuba, came to Sears, and we distributed them.
So did he set up a
He set up a plant.
in Havana?
No.
He brought it up here to the U.S.?
We didn't want them shipped directly to the
Gotcha.
United States.
So they were shipped directly into Havana.
To Havana, and from Havana
To the U.S.
to the U.S.
You went down to get them.
But I had to go down there and organize everything when the shipment came in.
Yeah.
I was there. So how many lives we saved, I don't know, but it was a vital item that the Air Force needed. We also supplied the Navy with necessities out in San Francisco. So I was kept pretty busy by and large. I wasn't on the line, but we were War Production Board. They were responsible with Henry Kaiser with the Liberty ships. And if it hadn't been for the way we organized our logistics, I mean,
Yes.
we could have been in serious difficulty.
Well, take me then to immediately after the war then. What?
Now, after the war, I was given the opportunity there was a company, which we will call Welby, that had the original patents on battery-operated movements of all kinds.
The company's name was?
Welby.
Battery-operated?
Battery-operated timing devices, primarily clocks and watches. And I saw great opportunities. They had a plant in Switzerland and one in Germany, West Germany, in a little town called Schwenningen. And I left Sears at that time. I felt that I wanted to do something on my own, and this worked out extremely well.
Could you tell me what year was that now?
That was in, actually, I took over the operation in 1959.
Okay.
And we manufactured, at least 1.5 million movements a year. And we were looking for additional production at the time. And we had the opportunity to open a plant in Japan. And
now, the Welby, were they located, were they manufacturing the product?
in Europe, yes.
In Europe?
Yes. And we also, at the time, they had the complete production of the largest cuckoo clock factory in the world. And they manufactured 400,000 cuckoo clocks a year.
Oh, wow.
And we shipped them all over the world.
Yeah.
Most of them came to the United States. Another factory we could
But you were living here, you were living in the U.S.
in the U.S., but I had an office in Zurich.
Yeah.
So I spent about 2 to 3 months every year in Europe, primarily Switzerland, Germany, England, and France. And Betty would, of course, join me occasionally.
Yes. Every vacation.
Yeah,
Right.
on a vacation.
Right.
I'd take in the wintertime to St. Moritz, in the summertime
Yeah.
to Lugano or one of the...
Well, oh, sounds good.
Now, of course, we did have distributors in other countries. And about every 3 years or so, I would travel from Switzerland to Cairo. Cairo, I would then go to India, New Delhi, from New Delhi to Singapore, Singapore to Malaya, Kuala Lumpur. Then we had a substantial operation in the Philippines. From there we went to Hong Kong, where we did have an assembly plant, and that back to...
I want to back up a little. So, did you have a plant in Cairo?
No, just a distributor.
Just distributors.
That's right.
Yeah.
We didn't have a plant. We did have a facility in Hong Kong, but we did not have a facility in India.
Okay.
My experiences in India, I was there in '61, I believe it was, and that's when China invaded Tibet. And I was more or less, I was in Pan American, wasn't coming in for about 3 weeks. So I was staying at the Ashoka Hotel in New Delhi, and I figured, what do I do for 3 weeks in India? So I contacted a local travel agency there, and he said he could get 2 Sikhs, the Sikh of the warrior class.
Oh, yes.
You got the Brahmins, the priests, and the Sikhs, and they have those turbans.
They wear the turban.
And the turbans are there in their religion, in the Hindu religion, they're not allowed to cut their hair. So the turbans actually, their hair comes down to their waist. So they use the turban primarily to cover their hair. That was quite an experience because I covered most of northern India for about 2 weeks by car. If you call it a car, I mean.
Yeah.
It was an old Chevrolet that was in pretty bad condition.
And you have the Sikhs traveling with you?
I had both of them with me for translation, etc. We spent four days in Agra and the Taj Mahal, and that was most interesting. If you've been there, I mean, it's a sight in itself. The thing that amazed me the most was the fact that in the outer, and on the plaster or brick, they have semi-precious jewels that were embedded in the walls. And I couldn't get a picture, but I did get a picture of the whole, which I probably still have. It's a 36 milligram, 36 millimeter film. So I got to just about every little nook and cranny. The thing that impressed me the most is the women coming down from the hills with water jugs. Coming down for water on their head. Elephants on the road. Yeah. Donkeys, going around, on the wells, etc. And the men, and all on their haunches, with their worry beads. As you went to in a small town, you'd see this, and the thing that devastated me was the condition of the untouchables. Yeah. And the untouchables, by their religion, are not even human. They haven't gone through the period of reincarnation. It takes thousands of years. It's when they come back as a cow that they become sacred, and then eventually they can become human. And in the hotels there, it's quite unusual. You're assigned a houseboy, and the houseboy takes care of everything. He makes your breakfast. In other words, he takes care of your clothes, etc., etc. So the 2 weeks, the 3 weeks that I spent in India, gave me an insight into the country that I think very few people have. Well, that then, and in the Philippines, I had the opportunity. I actually engaged a hovercraft. You've seen them. It's a small boat that goes on top of the water.
Right.
And my brother was a colonel in the army during the war, and he was on MacArthur's staff. And I said, if I ever get to the Philippines, there are 2 places I wanted to see. One was Corregidor, and the other was Bataan. Mm-hmm. And I managed to see both of them. And in fact, I made arrangements, and at the time, there was a sergeant in the army on a jeep that conducted me around. And he took me to the gun emplacements, and he told me that if the guns had been in proper position and were movable, the Japanese would never have taken over the Philippines. They could have prevented the ships from coming in. But that could or could not be true. Right. But in any event, it was a very interesting experience.
Tell me about Japan. When did you?
When MacArthur was in Japan, the trading companies in Japan dominate the country. You've got Mitsubishi, Mitsui, or the two largest. MacArthur felt not to eliminate the trading companies, but he felt it desirable to break them up. So Toyamenka, Mitsubishi became Mitsubishi and Toyamenka, and Mitsui became Mitsui and Ito, and Nichimen, and then the fifth largest was Ito. So when you did business in Japan, you normally went through one of the trading companies. For example, Toyamenka at that time was a company doing $2 billion, which in the 60s was a lot of money. 50% of it was import, 50% of it was export. So they provided financing for small manufacturers. The Sonys were the exception. The small manufacturers went through the trading company. They supplied everything for them. And they called me and told me that there was a small plant about 150 miles from Tokyo. I believe the name was Nagata. And they were making these 10 transistor radios.
Yes.
And he felt that if we gave them the movements, they could assemble the movements at a reasonable cost. And we needed additional production. So I made a trip, and it was Toyamenka, the Sumitomo Bank, and we met in the city, and we had the mayor, the head of the union, the banker, everything was organized. And they said they could train their people in the local high school, and it would be very, very simple to manufacture our movements. So while we didn't actually own the factory, they set up the production. They worked for us exclusively on a contract basis. It also, however, the quality from Japan at that time was very, very poor. Not as good as it is today. They completely, I think it's people like myself and many others that had them become quality conscious, which they are.
Yes, they became very much so.
Very much so.
There was a time when Made in Japan signified something that...
They made the worst cars in the world.
Yeah. But then came that Renaissance, and they changed around and demonstrated to the world that they could produce quality products and at a terrific price.
And that's how Japan became a major factor from an industrial point of view. For example, they could make quality merchandise. However, you had to be very, very specific. What we did, there was a Swiss company that we engaged to follow through on the quality. And we were the first to put in statistical control. Basically, instead of getting your production at the end and then testing it, we tested it at about 5 different levels. So it was rejected at a level. Now, that whole system was introduced in the United States many, many years ago. Not every factory followed it, but the factories that did follow it found that it was certainly more economical to get production at 3 or 4% at the end instead of 10%. Because if you had it at 10%, you had to have a factory that manufacture 110%. Right. So you're saving by eliminating at the first stage. You eliminated the waste at the end. And we put in that system in Japan, and it became very effective. So I would say over a period of about,
Now, this is Welby.
this is Welby, yes.
Still Welby.
Yeah. We also had a division. As I said, we had, well, as long as I was in Germany, we got the distribution of movements for, you've seen these grandmother clocks, grandfather clocks?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we had the distribution for the movements, and we sold most of those movements in the United States to furniture manufacturers. They'd manufacture the cases, and we would supply the movements.
Okay.
That was quite a profitable operation. And of course, the cuckoo clocks. You're probably interested in the cuckoo clocks.
Of course.
Now, we've been coming to Door County.
Well, let me before you move into the subject, tell me then, is it around this time that we're talking now? We've got you up here in 1961, or is it the early 60s that you started coming here? Or
Actually, we started coming to Glidden Lodge in the early 50s.
the early
57.
Okay.
We brought the family up and we stayed there for many years
Yes.
before we purchased it. It was nice.
So, was this the first property that you purchased?
Yes.
And I assume then you bought it then directly from Ewald Smoke?
No, actually, we didn't. The house, there was a house here,
Huh?
and it was built by a builder from the North Shore of Chicago. As his own personal home.
Zillmer's name was Clarence Zillmer.
Clarence Zillmer. His wife didn't like living up here, staying up here alone, so he put it on the market.
It wasn't
We were
really.
fortunate enough to see it, and
Is
Clarence,
this the original house?
part of it is.
Part of
really-
it.
All right. Yeah,
Part.
because I can tell there's been some additions.
What you see out here, what you see here, what you see downstairs, the garage. But he used to come up on weekends with his men. He found he couldn't get competent carpenters as far as he was concerned. So he came up with a group of men, and he would build, on Saturday, Sunday, for 3 days during the week. And he was building it, started to build it as a retirement home. As a result, you'll notice that it's wood paneling throughout.
Okay.
On the ceiling, on the walls, etc.
Yes.
Everything is wood paneled. We had a friend that knew the Sheigs, and Scheig at that time, Hank Scheig was vice president of Lutheran Insurance Company, in Appleton, and it wasn't officially on the market, but a friend of ours that was in the real estate business said she thought that they had heard that he was interested in selling. So I came up in February of '64, and he said yes, and his wife tugged me and she said, "I hope you buy this place." I said, "Why?" She said, "I don't want to live here. I want to live in Florida." She said, "Once I'm up here," she said, "I'm all alone." She said, "In the meantime, I bought a boat, and I didn't know where to keep the boat."
Yes.
You know, the boat that I have.
Yes.
The first boat I bought was was not a Chris Craft. It was another brand. It was the Bertram, a Bertram.
What was the boat? You had me out one day on your boat.
Yes, that's a Chris Craft.
We had a great time. Yeah.
We had a good time that
We
day.
sure did.
Yeah. And I
You
still have
handled
it.
it very well.
did you catch fish?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah,
I still have the boat, by the way.
good for you.
Yeah,
Go out again.
and we go out once a week, and I took out
Laddie?
Laddie's friend, who apparently got seasick. So. Right. Well, in any event, Ewald Smoke wouldn't build the place for me. See, he owned all this property, which, by the way, he offered to me at one time. Remember?
Is that right?
Yeah. He said, well, what? He owned miles and miles of property.
Yeah.
Yeah, before the Fairfield and Brogan bought it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I wasn't in the real estate business, so
Yeah.
I figured, what do I do with it? And this was an ideal location and partially built, and I figured it was ideal. And it was all quality. He had the stone, the bricks came in from California.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's that special brick they make out there.
We
And-
don't have any brick trimmed out there.
and he had woodworking all through the place. The deck wasn't here. This
Well,
room,
that room wasn't finished either.
and this area wasn't finished. But it was enough that I could live in it at the time.
It's a beautiful location.
And-
This is so private.
And we had private, and of course a lot of the landscaping I'd done, and I turned the garage into an apartment
Mm-hmm.
with a kitchen and everything else.
That's it.
So
The garage was under the house.
that's
I got it.
over
So
there.
that's
Yeah.
what we
And
did.
they got their own deck down below.
I see.
So
Built that and then
that's
built the
worked
garage onto the house.
I got you.
That's the way it
And then-
grew.
That's right. It grew like topsy.
and having been around the world, I took that trip that I was telling you about every 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been around the world about 4 or 5 times during the course of my life. And I can truthfully say, in the summertime, I don't think there's a better location.
I've had the same feeling. I traveled a lot through Southeast Asia on business and so on. And God, I loved, always in the back of my mind was I can't wait to get up to your county and to look forward to come up to the county and be here.
Especially during this.
Summertime. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Of course, we use it a lot now too in the fall. We're now here 10 months a year.
Well,
Laddie's
Right
parents
now-
found it too, didn't they?
right now we're here 5.5
And
months.
then back to Florida.
And then we're in
Grandpa-
Florida,
your
the
grandparents.
balance.
Okay.
And-
Tell me about. Let's go back to the watch business. Then.
Okay.
Where did you?
Well,
So you're
we-
you've got
in other
Welby
words, what
and
happened then is, by the way, we had another division that had a contract with Disney, and we manufactured the Disney watches and clocks, and which was an interesting operation,
Mm-hmm.
and we sold that all over the country.
There's a story I understand about a cuckoo clock that ended up
Well, let
in the
me
lodge.
let me tell you how that happened, and then I'll tell you what we eventually did with the company, right?
Yeah.
Because eventually I merged with Elgin, and that's another story. But the cuckoo clock, they sent me the cuckoo clock. It was made by one of the great carvers. I mean, you would hear it was absolutely, probably, his work is in all the museums. And when I looked at that clock, I said, my God, what have they done? They thought Glidden Lodge was my lodge. So they put it on commission, and he spent months and months carving this clock. I mean, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And frankly, I've told Andy and I've told Donnie, I've told them all, I said, it's been on the wall for 43 years. He gave it to him in 63. So it's been
The
there for
present
40.
owners of the.
And I said, look, if you ever remove it from the wall, it's still my property. but I said, it has a home here. It has a home on that wall.
Yes.
And as long as the restaurant is in operation, that's where it will stay.
That's
And
right.
it's a magnificent clock. It's worth a lot of money. I don't think they realized the value
don't.
of that clock.
I guess a lot of people complained about the cuckoo, so they turned it up. They don't wind it anymore.
There was an 8-day cuckoo clock. But as I said, his work, if I had the provenance on his work, I tell you, at an auction it would go for a very high price.
Yeah.
So the clock was made. I thought I'd get him a nice little cuckoo clock, in other words, etc.
Yeah.
But as soon as I said Glidden Lodge, they said, my God, if he has a lodge, I mean, we have to give him something. So they placed it with, well, I've had this cane made here, you know. This is a very unusual.
On the camera?
Yeah. It's a very unusual cane. This is Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay.
This is Michelangelo. This is Shakespeare and Rembrandt. And that takes care of the 15th and 16th centuries, because that's when they dominated their various fields. Now this is an artistic creation.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Now,
Let me just turn it. Who is
Bob McCurdy. Bob McCurdy's up in Bailey's Harbor,
Uh-huh.
and he's retired now, and he made this on commission for me. And I think he did a magnificent job.
Yes.
Because we got all the pictures are from the internet. So
That's
I
his
looked at the
collection.
pictures, etc., and he's got beautiful reproductions. I'm merely bringing it up is that a master carver worked on that cuckoo clock.
Yeah.
And it takes a master carver to do something like that. And he was the outstanding carver in Germany. And that industry was a very interesting industry, because the carvings were handmade by the local farmers. That's what they did in the wintertime. We'd give them the plates, in other words, in the wood. They'd carve it. Then we manufactured the movements, etc. And so it was really an industry that was indigenous to that particular area, which is called tree bed. It's in the Black Forest area,
Okay.
which is the southern part of Germany.
Tell
So-
me now about the merger.
Yeah.
The
Well,
bringing together.
I felt that we could go national, and we started to make decorator clocks. We had the movements, which we sold to others. We sold movements to Sunbeam, General Electric, etc. And we were going to go directly to the jewelers and department stores.
Okay.
To get name recognition would cost millions and millions of dollars. How do you get name recognition? We started out with our decorator wall clocks, and we sold hundreds of thousands of decorator wall clocks. That were the big star clocks that was our production. And then I had two designers that did nothing but create designs. We were in every department store, every jewelry store. But we also sold them the watches and the clocks for Disney. I mean, that was a very big operation. So I had enough salesmen to go in and then I figured if we could go national, Elgin had 100 salesmen, and that was the logical thing for me to do. I never released, in other words, we sold them, we merged with them, although the company that I had started, still remained in existence. It was not competitive with Elgin in any way.
Okay.
And so I handled all their trouble there as Elgin felt that they could go into communications. I was president for a number of years, and I had a contract, and we did very well. But my plan was to build using the Elgin name on clocks, number one, which we did, and use the Elgin name on stainless steel and fine sterling silver, and in other words, give the jewelers, and it was on that basis that I made the original contacts in Sweden. To have it manufactured, in Sweden, and designed by Carl Bjorn, who was one of the outstanding designers in Europe. But Elgin was more interested at that time in getting into communications, competing with AT&T.
I didn't realize. Yeah.
But that's another story. But the point is, I enjoyed, and I did develop in Japan radios. Zenith was on the top, and we brought out a radio to compete with Zenith's worldwide clock. In other words, that they were selling for $200, and we had that made by a company in Japan. So that was when I merged with Elgin. I was developing that phase of the business for them, which if they had continued. Are we running out of time? However, Elgin is still a good name, although today it's no longer a functioning company.
What about I've also heard about a ballpoint that you were involved.
Yes.
A ballpoint pen.
When I was at Sears, I was approached. He originally approached General Wood. You probably have heard of General Wood.
Yes.
At Sears.
Yes.
He actually was the motivator. And in fact, he had a terrific career. He was the quartermaster general in the First World War, and he also helped build the Panama Canal, and he did a great job at Sears.
Okay.
He gave me a call and said, "I'm sending someone down to you with something that looks very interesting to me." And this man came down, and he had the patents on the first ballpoint pen, the original patents on the ballpoint pen. I looked at it, and I said, "This is very interesting." I said, "Let me send it down to our laboratory and have it analyzed." In the meantime, I understand this man had property that Sears was interested in Mexico City. And
He had property?
he had property
Yeah.
that had the invention. See?
Okay.
And needless to say, Sears was interested in the property. See? But I was interested in it so happens that pens came under my category.
Okay.
We had our own pen line, and we sold fountain pens under the Sears tradition name. And we had a manufacturer that made pens for us at very good prices. But they were the conventional pens, the ink pens.
Yeah.
When I saw this ballpoint pen, I was a little dubious as to whether it would work. So I sent it down to the laboratory. They said, "It will work, but how well it will work over a period of time, we're not sure." Well, I figured it was introducing the ballpoint pen for the first time in the world, really. If it did work, would be quite a feather in our cap, certainly in Sears' cap.
Did he have the
He had
refills?
He had let me explain that
Yeah.
to you. Yes, he had refills. And I'll explain what was wrong with the pen and why it works successfully today. And this probably, to be the first one to to recognize the value of a ballpoint pen. I mean, it's an accomplishment in itself. I think. Well, here is the story. He had a manufacturing setup, and the ball was attached to the pen, and you had an ink cartridge that you inserted in the pen. He was selling so you'd sell the inserts, see, in a permanent container. See. Well, that's all very well. We had a full page in color in the Christmas catalog, and we sold them. Did we sell them? I mean, couldn't keep them in stock. However, the aftermath was that the return ratio was also pretty spectacular.
What would happen?
What happened, and people didn't really send it down between our laboratory engineer and myself. He said, "What's wrong with this?" He said, "It stops working." He said the ball should not be attached to the pen. It should be attached to the insert. In other words, to the to the ink to the cartridge. He said what happens is it gets an air block, and it can get an air block at any time. Then it'll stop writing. And of course, we probably should have patented it at that time.
Right. Never knew.
Now, Papermate picked it up. I mean, I think they're still in business, right?
Sure.
So, as soon as and Schaefer was interested in it, and Parker was interested in it, and someone else came out with it. But when they change it to the cartridge, then you have a constant flow. There's no possibility of an airlock. And that's how the ballpoint pen.
Did Schaefer or
they eventually
Papermate
they eventually got in.
through it?
They eventually got into it correctly. And so did Schaefer and everybody else in the world.
Yeah.
But the one that worked on it in the beginning and saw the first model is none other than myself.
Right.
So I forgot.
You didn't save any of those originals, did you?
I should
They'd
have.
be worth something. They'd be worth something. Well, now we're down towards, how are you spending these, the golden years?
Well,
I know you spent time down in Florida.
we spent time in Florida, and I've always been nautically inclined. And Betty and I, for the last 30 years, have taken approximately 35 cruises around the world.
Oh, great.
We have traveled extensively to the Orient. We've been to Japan. We've been to China. We've climbed the Great Wall in China, in Beijing. If you've been there,
yes.
I mean, you've been to, and we stayed, I believe it was one of the national hotels. It was the Great Wall Hotel, and although today I'm sure this was back in '85.
Okay, now, as a merchandiser, you must have, in Hong Kong, this used to fascinate me. I'd see those big cruise liners coming in, and they dock. They come down people will come off the dock, and they go right in, and there's a mall right smack there. I mean, to me it was
Go
one
in
of
and
the
buy
most
all
brilliant
these knockoffs.
merchandising creations, you know, get them right off the boat and walking down to
I
have a
spent.
story that I can tell you about a purchase that I made.
Tell me.
And when my granddaughter was here, she discovered it, so I gave it to her. But anyway, I had gone into the shop that I had been told had made handbags and that they were legitimate. And I was interested in a Gucci bag
Okay.
at this point. So I was shown several, and I selected one and purchased it and took it back to the ship. I took it out of the bag that they had substituted a fake for the original, because the original Gucci, as I said, I gave it to me, had a, I knew this, they had in the label, there was a registration number and everything else under the
Okay.
label on the inside of the purse. And I had looked for that in the one that I was looking for. And it had, unfortunately, the boat didn't sail on time.
Oh, very good.
So I hightailed it back.
Yes.
Cost me taxi fare, but I got back to the
You
shop
got that.
before it closed. And I demanded
Oh,
the
yeah.
one that I had seen.
I bet there was a lot of bowing and apologizing.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
But anyway, my 13-year-old granddaughter was cleaning out my closet.
Came across
She
the.
came across it, so
You've
I
got
had,
the
to,
original.
I had to give it to her.
Yeah. Terrific. That's
In
good.
Hong Kong, they also sold Rolex watches on the same basis.
Oh, yeah.
They changed the dial, but there's no way they could engrave the movements. So I had the dial on the actually being in the watch business, the only watch I could never get it cost
This here.
Well,
was a Patek Philippe.
I want
Now,
to say.
yes.
Yes.
Can I put in one thing that I
Yes,
would like
please,
to tell you?
please.
All right. I was born on the 45th parallel
Oh, is that right?
in Nova Scotia, Canada.
Is that right?
And that's why I feel so much at home here, see?
That's right.
We're on the 40.
Maybe that's why
Came
I feel
around.
at home. Because my parents are from Newfoundland.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No kidding.
Oh, yes. Both parents came down to New York from Newfoundland. They met in New York City.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, we'd like to wrap up here. It's been an interesting afternoon. And George, it's always a delight to spend time with you. And hear you've had a good full life. That's for sure, you and Betty.
Still
And,
going.
I envy you all those cruises you've taken.
Yes,
I've
please.
only done a couple of them. That was all. But it's a great way to travel, and you really get
Wonderful.
to see the world. We have to thank our producer and director, makeup man, whatever else he gets called a lot of things, Mr. Laddie Chapman, and Channel 19. Thank you.
Laddie,
Here again with George Arlen, and he has some pictures to show us from his family archives.
Laddie, I was looking at some of the pictures that I was taking when I lived in San Francisco. I was there for almost 7 years. This particular picture was taken at Mount Hood. The advent was the opening of the first ski lift in the United States at Mount Hood. And this picture was taken by a life photographer, and I was fortunate to be there at that time. I've always had a desire to climb Mount Whitney, and within a few days, which is the highest point in the United States, at 14,000, I believe, 600 feet, which I accomplished. And this is a picture on my way up. 2 days later, I was in Death Valley, had bad water, which was 279 feet below sea level and the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere. So I felt I accomplished what I wanted to do within a 3-day period.
Mm-hmm.
I climbed the highest and I went to the lowest.
Mm-hmm.
One of my accomplishments when I was young was I was a fairly good pilot, and I had a pilot license for a Piper Cub and a Ryan monoplane, and these are two of the pictures. This was the Ryan monoplane, and this was the Piper Cub. These pictures were taken in 1939 or 1940. I also had a picture that was taken when I was in my 40s. This particular picture, I suppose, should be shown with my wife, as they were taken at approximately the same time. They were taken in Chicago, and at that particular time, it was in around 1950, 1955. I was an executive with Sears Roebuck in Chicago. This is a picture of Betty that was taken before we were married. I believe it was in 1939. She was a very young girl at that time.
I want to thank you, George, for showing us your family album.
Well, I have many, many books. I mean, of pictures taken, during the course of my life. But these are a few of the highlights. And I want to thank you, Laddie, for doing a wonderful job. I appreciate it very much.